Hi everyone, it's Amelia and you are watching the Bad Astrologers monthly Q&A video. We have lots of exciting questions about tarot and how psychics work and about Mars retrograde. So let's go ahead and without further ado, dive in. The first question is, like I said, about tarot. It says, do you ever integrate your tarot practice with astrology? I'm pretty successful at applying my astro knowledge for more well-rounded, comprehensive tarot readings, but I'm curious about the other way around. I love that. Have you ever pulled some cards while interpreting a chart or used transits to plan certain types of readings? I'd love any ideas you might have on how to combine the two or how they could complement each other. Thank you. Thank you for asking the question. So lots to cover here. I love that this is a billion questions that kind of constellate, is that a word, around the topic? So first things first, my favorite way to pull astrology into tarot readings or vice versa is just memorizing those correspondences between the two. And for that, I recommend getting yourself a Thoth deck. It's spelled Thoth, but the TH actually transliterates to just a hard T sound. It is the deck created by Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris. And Thoth is the Egyptian god of wisdom with the ibis head. But this deck it's creepy and it has strange vibes and has really incredibly beautiful and detailed artwork. But what I love about it is that it includes the astrological correspondences right on the bottom of the card. So if you are working on that and trying to memorize it, you can just kind of use it like flashcards. So every time you pull a card from that deck, it's right there in your face, and it helps you really familiarize yourself with those. There's another book that I like. It's called Tarot and Astrology by Corinne, and I can't remember the last name, but I will post a link to it in the notes of this video. It, in a really friendly way, presents the links between astrology and tarot using the Golden Dawn system of Hermetic Kabbalah, and it makes it pretty easy and straightforward. Another great book is Understanding the Thoth Tarot by Lon Milo Duquette. That's a great resource too. So grab those books. I've noticed in readings sometimes if the astrological correspondence with a card can be symbolic, right? So if you're about to enter into, let's say this Mars retrograde in Aries, if you were to pull the Two of Wands, that might be an indication that, oh, once Mars goes into Aries, something's going to happen that I need to pay attention to. Also, on top of that, for pulling tarot into astrology, I would say take a day and pull out all the cards that correspond to your natal chart. Now, not every single astrological placement is going to have a corresponding card. There's only 78 cards in the tarot deck. But if your placement doesn't have a corresponding card, you can take the two major arcana cards that go along with it. So let's say you had Venus and Libra. You would take the Empress and Justice and just lay them out together and look at it and meditate on that and see, what does that teach you about what being a Venus and Libra is, or what that energy has to offer. Donnelly LaRose, I will link to her website. I learned of her through the tarot lady, Teresa Reed, who is lovely. She explains it as the Empress wearing Justice's clothes, right? Or if you were gonna do Uranus and Scorpio, that would be the Fool wearing Death's clothes. And I think that's a really great construct, a really fun exercise to do. Although, you know, sometimes you will hit the specifics, like Three of Swords is Saturn in Libra, Venus in Virgo is a Nine of Coins, and so on and so forth. So definitely take the time to play with that. I will say I don't usually use tarot and astrology together in readings for clients. I like to just focus on the astrology. I find that they're used for different things. I know Austin Coppock has described it as astrology is for when, tarot is for what, and magic is for how. And I think that is outstanding. I think that is a great way to think about it. Occasionally, tarot can give you some insight into how, or maybe when, if you happen to hit on one of those correspondence synchronicities like I mentioned a minute ago. But for the most part, also, I find tarot to be, it's more intuitive and it's more symbolic. And if you're trying to plan with like hard facts, right? Often tarot is more, it can be very literal, but there's a lot more intuition and hunches that go into that. Whereas astrology is kind of like looking up the weather forecast for the next week, right? Like we know that it's probably going to rain on Thursday, right? Like we know that the Mars-Saturn square is going to be tough. So I tend to just focus in on that. Although I do often, like I was just talking about, to help a client occasionally understand, I'll bring in if they're already a tarot person and they love the deck, but they just are new to the concept of astrology, I might say, oh, well, Venus is like the Empress, and since you have your Venus in Aries, that's like Venus, the Empress, and as the Emperor, right? So that does help sometimes. I think ultimately, here's a fun trick to try. So for my personal practice, I tend to use tarot a lot more for my own personal use, not in a client-based setting. But when you are using tarot, like sometimes I'll use it to meditate on my bigger transits that are going on. So I'm having Uranus opposing my sun, I'm having Neptune squaring my moon. Those are really tough aspects to have to like both luminaries. So I thought, what can I do to better understand this? And so what you can do is you pull a tarot card to represent each of those planets. I pull one tarot card to represent Uranus and pull another tarot card next to it to represent my sun, right? And then I pull a third card in between them that represents how I can bring those into balance, what the lesson is behind it. And I found that it's extremely simple. It's never more than 2 or 3 cards, but it can really, really help you get some nice visuals for the story of what you're going through, and just give you that validation sometimes too of like, oh, this is really hard and I just pulled the 5 of Swords, so that makes a lot of sense. But I see that for the bridge card, I got the 10 of Coins, so really this is about me building a legacy or a foundation that feels really secure. You see what I mean? I hope that helps. I will jot all of these down in the show notes, but that's a lot of tips and tricks that I've amassed over many years, and try them out and let me know what you think. Let me know what you discover by using them. So, okay, next up we have Cal. They say there's been a pile up of planets. I love that. Pile up of planets in my 8th house on and off for the last couple of years, and it's been a lot. What kind of changes might I look forward to once Saturn and Jupiter are both in Aquarius in my 9th house? Soon, not even that long from now. I keep thinking about how it is just around the corner, y'all. We are so close. Once Saturn goes direct, we're not going to tread that territory again for many long years. And I know this has been such an incredibly difficult time for so many folks. So, I don't think that Jupiter and Saturn are going to come together and change, like it'll change things, but you're still going to be working with the same materials, right? You're just going to know a better arrangement to put them in. I think it will just breathe fresh life into things, and sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you just need a different way of looking at stuff, and that's going to feel so good. And I think especially for you, Cal, that is what this is going to be. So the shift from the 8th house to the 9th house is about taking the inner wisdom that you gained from that 8th house transit, because it is truly this deep underworld journey and metamorphosis, and applying it to your outer world in some way. What I mean by that is, 8th house transits, even if Jupiter is there, can be a really introspective time. And a lot of the changes that you go through, they're incredibly potent and some really overwhelming, and a lot of times because they have to do with all the things that are scary to share with other people, like sexuality and intimacy and your finances, your net your net worth as in, you know, investments of time and energy and resources, and your desires, right? So those are things that if you didn't like share them with someone else, like those could be complete secrets forever. But when it moves to the 9th house, you are able to effectuate that in a more concrete way, because the 9th house is actually more cerebral. It's about taking those desires, and it's kind of about switching your mindset so that you make different decisions. Your personal philosophy changes so that with that shift, with your changes in decision making, you end up actually taking action on what you want to do in a way that is aligned with your values and your ideals, right? So an example of that might be if you spent time during your 8th house transit feeling really unfulfilled or vulnerable about your sexuality, or struggling with intimacy. I think that may have been a very private struggle in the past, and then moving forward, that would be something that you're more, you know, you're kind of like out of fucks, I guess is a great way to put it. You're out of fucks, and you're willing to, you know, the 9th house expands, it breaks down boundaries, Jurassic Park style. So you're willing to just like step out and do whatever it takes to reconnect with the outer world again. It's kind of like re-emerging from Hades, if you will. I think you'll notice that you're less introverted and you want to connect. If the 8th house is, you know, just wanting to stay in your house all the time as like a hermit going through this spiritual journey, you know, the 9th house is still very spiritual, but if you think of the 8th house being like the private Persephone type, the 9th house is the archetype of the priest. And think about the priest is constantly interfacing with the public. They are a public figure. And, you know, even now, like priests in the Catholic Church, which honestly, like I have lots of feelings about that. We're not going to go down that road. But especially in ancient Greece, these things were public offices, right? And so being a priest, let's say of Athena or Hera, had a lot to do with looking after the public good, right? They would talk to members of the citizenry and their voices carried weight. And so, yeah, I think it will still feel very spiritual, but just in a different way. You're gonna take the things that you feel viscerally now in your body and say, how can I change the world with that, right? I've transformed, now I want to transform what's around me. I think that because the 9th house is also idea generation and dissemination, you might take what you learned during that underworld journey and spin it out into some kind of content creation, whether it's writing a book. You could create some sort of project like a podcast or even social media, like outward facing initiatives that really get your word out are so important during the 9th house. I think with Jupiter and Saturn together there, so I think you get the flashy Jupiterian, how do I explain, like opportunities and offers, but they're not as easy as they would be otherwise. Like you have to work for it. It could be something that is so big and exciting that it feels like a big Jupiter step up, but it also requires, like I said, a mindset shift of, okay, I'm a leader in this, maybe some kind of thought leader, or my opinion now carries weight, and so that's going to feel a lot different. It's not just you privately writing in your diary about your 8th house thoughts. I mean, it's you publicly sharing what you think and potentially and hopefully impacting other people's views with it. So I hope that helps. I hope it makes sense. If you have any other questions, hit me up by email. But I think that you're very much going to like another thing about having Jupiter and Saturn out of your 8th house and into your 9th that I think you might like more is that the 8th house is off, well, two things. It can be associated with trauma, and you know, Jupiter doesn't necessarily have to be good. It can just be a lot, or it can be a good thing that doesn't feel subjectively good. So if you spent the last couple year or so working through some sort of like private trauma, that is empirically good down the line, but that doesn't mean the experience of it like felt amazing or it's something that you want to live through every day. So that's a good thing. And also the 8th house, again, it's tied with the 2nd house and is so associated with our resources. It's not so much like your paycheck, but it's occasionally like payments that are like larger payments that you get, or taxes. And so, not having so much focus on the finances of the things that fall from that 7th house and having to interact with the world, it feels better, right? It's a lot more fun to focus. You have a little more, I don't want to say you have control over the 9th house, but let's face it, you're going into a 9th house year, series of years, during a pandemic. And so, I think that could be it. It's just Jupiter and Saturn together. You have these beautiful opportunities that have limitations, right? Normally the 9th house is travel, but none of us are traveling right now. So I think Saturn is also delays. So one thing I'm thinking about with the Great Conjunction for everybody is some sort of opportunity or thing that you're really excited about that like you get to enjoy it in the moment, but it takes a while to blossom, or there's some sort of delayed gratification from it. Maybe once Jupiter goes into Pisces next year, and then again the year after, you'll get like the benefit of that, especially with your Pisces arrangement. But yeah, you're gonna do great. I'm excited. Let me know how it all feels when it goes down, when it happens. Check in. Okay, next up we have, I won't say their name because they didn't say if I could. So they say, my day job is getting more and more toxic every day due to poor leadership. This person wrote last time about this day job, which was like highly toxic, and they were concerned about Mars retrograde and how to handle it. I have been quietly making plans to get a new job for months now. However, things are not moving as quickly as I would like, and I cannot stop stewing in my own frustration and anger with the director of the current workplace. Fair enough. Every day I feel like they have a new bone to pick with me, and I just have to lie there and deal with it. I have angry and obsessive thoughts that never seem to leave me about this person, no matter how hard I try. I feel like their energy is targeting me specifically, and I want to be able to protect myself so I can enjoy my life outside of work. That everybody should be able to experience that feeling. Last time Mars went retrograde, I was targeted by a very phony psychic who almost got a lot of money out of me. Very embarrassing, but I learned my lesson. You don't have to feel embarrassed about that. We'll talk more about phony psychics in a minute. It's a thing that I don't think people discuss enough. I don't want my energy to be depleted like that again. I know in Mars retrograde management, you talked about spiritually protecting and cleansing yourself and gave the book Spiritual Cleansing as a recommendation. Do you have any other tips or practices for spiritually protecting yourself? So, yes, I have lots of thoughts about everything that you just said. And looking at your chart, you're having an especially difficult go of things with this Mars retrograde because, this is the extended Mars retrograde squaring Saturn, and you're having your Saturn return. So it's like a double square from Saturn, and honestly that probably just feels like shit, and I'm sorry. But the good news is that it won't be forever. I know that it probably feels impossible right about now, but it is only like a month and a half before things get better. Like, you can do 6 weeks of anything. It's only 6 weeks. You can start put it on your calendar and celebrate a little bit every week that you're this much closer to movement. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the phony psychics bit. They're out there, and I think now that the spirituality industry has become so much bigger, it's kind of hard to tell I don't want to call them fakes, but the scammers and grifters from the professionals. And the interesting thing is that this has been a struggle that's happened throughout all of history. I love, obviously, reading about ancient Greece and Rome, and there were people who, I forget the Greek word for it, but they would go around and say, I've been initiated into such and such cult, and I'll initiate you too with the secrets of the universe for, however many drachmae. When they had never actually received that initiation, and they were just going from town to town and taking people's money. So there's definitely a historical precedent for this. My advice on avoiding phony psychics is, first of all, listen to your gut. If anything feels weird, if you aren't sure, just trust that first. And then 2 rules of thumb that you can pretty much always rely on are, if you don't consent to asking them about it, that's usually a red flag. So if someone comes up to you, and by comes up to you, I mean in public or at an event or in a Zoom call or in your DMs, if someone says, I have just been feeling, I have a sense that you have this problem and da 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 da. Well, you didn't ask for that. Anybody can say that. Like, I could say right now, oh, I feel like you're having a problem, and that's psychologically manipulative. So no legitimate person would do that. If you had already paid for a reading, we might discuss, oh, it seems like you might be feeling energetically depleted. Here are some ways to work on that. That's a big no-no. And people do it. I get screenshots of this shit all the time. So avoid that. And then avoid at all costs people who will try to push your financial boundaries. So people have their prices, and if there's someone who's trying to sell to you at your own expense, that's not a good thing. I was at a retreat once, and another retreat goer, this is a retreat for, people who work in this industry. They were talking to me about how they thought I would be such a good fit for their program, and then they said to me, I just feel this sense. I feel a sense you should get your card out right now and pay for the service. And it was like $2,000. And it was just bananas to me. And she was like, yeah, I think it'd be it was so skeezy. It was gross, that would have, maxed out anybody's card. And also, like, that's another thing to look out for. If what the person is offering is very vague, like the person should have some sort of bylines or credentials or something, and that you should have a specific takeaway of what you're going to get, like time wise, like you're going to get this amount of that person's time, and you're going to get this specific type of service. But yeah, that was really gross, and they were definitely taking advantage of the environment, of the fact that we all had belief in spirituality, and a desire to improve our businesses. And so it happens. I did not pay that person. But they made me feel really bad about it, right? I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I feel weird about this. This makes me feel uncomfortable. And then they will try to deflect it back on you, but never, if somebody makes you feel like an asshole for having boundaries, that's on them. That is not on you. So phony psychics, what you gonna do? But you did the right thing. You figured it out and you didn't give them your money. And in the future, you're gonna be wise, and you're not going to fall for that. So as far as protecting yourself during a extended Mars retrograde, Saturn return type situation, the first steps that I would tell you to take are actually not in the spiritual world. They're the material world. You should always, always, always be thinking about, how can I effectuate this in the material world first, right? What steps do I have to take to make it happen? So for you in particular, I would say documentation is everything, and also watch your mental health. And here's why. So Mars retrograde squaring Saturn. Saturn is traveling through your 3rd house of communication, of your own thought patterns, your internal monologue, or your inner narrative. And so that square can really lead to dark thought loops, like obsessive thoughts, and whether it's kind of like you indicated, whether it's like external based. I feel like the Mars aspect with the 6th house, that's where the anger is coming out. And then the 3rd house piece with Saturn is where the obsession is coming in, where you're like, I can't stop thinking about this. I hate the way this feels, da 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 da. So it's totally normal to have some obsessive thought situations when these types of aspects arise, but it's really how you react to it. Saturn loves a structure. And I say this a lot, and honestly, I didn't used to take my own advice, but just recently with this Mars retrograde, I have been journaling every single day. And journaling specifically about a life transition that I'm trying to make. And it has been an incredible practice. And I can't recommend it enough. If you just set a timer on your phone for 20 minutes, that's not even that long. You can, doom scroll for 20 minutes. So instead of doom scrolling, put that timer on your phone and just write all of those angry thoughts out. Write anything. And you might be surprised the results that you get. My personal experience with it was that after a couple of days, I noticed that I was bored with writing out those thoughts. I was like, oh, I'm really gonna write the same thing again, and I'm like upset with this person and I don't like how they make me feel. I can go back 4 days in a row and see that pattern. You're able to like pull out and see your own patterns a little more clearly. And it works. I'm not cured of my frustrations by any means. I have plenty of them still, but I feel more self-aware about them, and definitely Saturn in the 3rd house, that could be really, really powerful for you. So I highly recommend it. I would say also just keeping a watch on your inner monologue, right? If those things are coming up in your inner monologue, interrupt it. Find something. The 3rd house is amazing for like podcasts, and I'm not saying that because I have a podcast. That sounds bad. No, like about anything. I love Michelle Obama's podcast. I love Jonathan Van Ness's podcast. Listen to a podcast. Listen to a song. Listen to WAP. Dance. Listen to, like watch a film, watch a masterclass. I'm watching a bunch of masterclasses. Like anything that you can do. If you're feeling like shit, the best thing you can do is just for a few minutes, just like set a timer. Like the masterclass classes are like 10 minutes each. And so if I have 10 minutes, I will just watch one. And it's such a palate cleanser, like to watch like Natalie Portman talk about green screen acting. And then I'm like, oh, I feel so inspired. Maybe I'll never do that, but I'm a movie fan. It's interesting to see how it's done, that artistry. So you see what I mean? Like already within my own frustrated thought loops that like kicked me off into something else. So also, like I said, documentation. If you're in a bad situation at work, the number one thing you can do is document everything that happens to you. If they're repeatedly overstepping your boundaries, saying things that are inappropriate, each time they do something like that, send an email to yourself. Make a Google Doc that has a timestamp. Do something. Reach out to, don't reach out if it isn't going to benefit you. You can keep it private. But if it's starting to become a hostile work environment, there are probably resources at your job that you could talk to privately. But yeah, document everything. Keep the receipts. It is absolutely vital. That's just good thinking. That's just self-protection. Also, plan your escape behind the scenes. So part of that journaling practice can be every time you get frustrated, every time you think, oh, I hate being here, take a minute to daydream and think about how do I want this to feel instead, right? Write about the career houses of your chart for like 30 minutes and be like, what are some things in my 2nd house that I can make more money from than this? What kind of 6th house environment would make me feel more stable than this? Like what kind of 10th house legacy would make me feel more satisfied than this bullshit? And that can give you things to help. And it also gives you something to look forward to. Even like small things to look forward to can help. So that was a lot of words that didn't answer your questions about spiritual protection at all. But now that we've talked about the things that you can do in your professional life and in your personal life to manage those professional stresses, let's talk about the spiritual piece. So the first thing you can do, and this is like spiritual, energetic, interpersonal, whatever, and I really struggle with this. My Venus and Virgo in the midheaven, I can't even begin to express the ways that I struggle with this, which is set boundaries. especially with Saturn in the 3rd house, Saturn loves the boundaries. So one thing that you could do if they're consistently overstepping with you, maybe based on your time, is just say, thank you, I am not available right now. I will be online in an hour. They should respect that, right? Say, can you set up some sort of out of office message that says, between the hours of X and X, I'm not going to get back to you. It's not that you can't. You're making a choice, and there is nothing wrong with making a choice to protect your health and your well-being. So setting those boundaries. Also the interpersonal boundaries of if this person is speaking to you in a way that isn't appropriate, it's totally okay to stop in the conversation and say, I hear you. The way that you're expressing this, it's not okay to speak to me disrespectfully in this way. And now I know that when you have boundaries, people that don't have them will get upset. But that's part of the practice. Saturn return, this is the hardest shit. I'm saying all of it like it's super easy, but the Saturn return stuff is hard as hell. As far as spiritual cleansing, my favorite things to do are the most simple. So if you have access to take a bath, taking a bath is like the most. It is everything. Just a super hot bath with salt, sea salt or pink salt. I use pink salt, has a more comforting, nourishing vibe, whereas the sea salt is more of a banishing, protective type thing. Sometimes I blend them. But just sitting in the bath. And sometimes I will do one of the tapas, the radiant holy breath. So you can look that up. There's all different ones. I often do the fire breath. It's 3 counts in, hold for 3 counts, and then exhale for 3 counts. The other ones are the air breath, which is breathe for, I think it's 6 counts, and then let it go for 6 counts. It's supposed to be like a ball moving up and down, never stopping. Obviously there's box breathing, which corresponds to the earth breath. So let's breathe for 3, hold for 3, exhale for 3, hold for 3. What you can experiment with your body and see what feels good to you. But the combination, I like to combine the elements in what I do. So the heat from the bath, the earth is the salt, the water is the actual bath, and then the air of the breath. It creates sort of this, I found that it creates this alchemical balance that, it's not, you don't need to go out and like buy a bunch of herbs, although you could, although I would research before you like put a bunch of cinnamon in your bath and burn yourself. Yeah, I think the simplest rituals make the most sense. Having a candle for protection, one thing, I don't have it nearby, I would show you. I have a real nice bougie candle, it smells amazing, and I picked a fragrance that had ingredients that were associated with prosperity, and I blessed it for prosperity, and every time I burn it, I sort of pray to myself on that, and you can do the same thing for a protective candle. Black candles are good, but are intense, and you got to be very clear with your intention with those. And then the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. I have been doing it since Gabriella taught it to me, and I've been practicing it with 22 teachings, and it really does. It makes a huge difference. I sometimes, Scorpio with Pluto on the sun, I occasionally do have times where I feel anxious or like psychically vulnerable is how I would describe it. And during those times when I feel really psychically vulnerable, the LVRP really makes a difference. It turns down that volume and it just throws up that extra layer of protection. So it's a really good thing. I think that's everything. Sometimes writing down your worries and fears and then either burning them or asking your deity to look after them for you, asking a protective spirit to help, all of those things are resources you can use. Oh, and then of course, if you want to step up your bath, I love putting apple cider in a bath. That's a really great ingredient, in addition to the salt, to kind of purify. I found if you're really having evil eye based problems, if you're like, wow, all these people super hate me. Which, by the way, if you are thinking those things, that may be true. Sometimes legitimately people don't like you or me or anybody very much. But you need to also think about, what evidence do I, if you're feeling that way, compare the evidence with how you're feeling and see where the discrepancies are. See if you can catch yourself in those moments of, oh, well, I feel vulnerable, I just feel anxious, and I need to turn that down. But when it really is psychic protection time, bath, salt, LBRP, apple cider, and a candle helps. Good luck. I hope you feel better. I'm here for you. If you need anything, shoot me an email. Okay, next up is the last one, I believe. No, there's a couple. Okay, so it says, hi Amelia, do you have any recommendations for finding asteroids important to a natal chart? There are so many, and most sites seem to be about selecting the asteroid and seeing where it fits in the chart. Maybe I'm missing something. If not, looks like more detective work. Okay, this is such a good question because I talk about asteroids all the time. Other astrologers mention asteroids, and we kind of gloss over the fact that that's a little niche and no one's ever actually explained how to do asteroid research. So I have my list of asteroids that I apply to any chart. Most of them are asteroids that have something to do with feminine spirituality or energetic or psychic ability. But you can create your own list of asteroids that you like looking at in a chart. I keep them in a document and I copy and paste them, or honestly, I have it so memorized, I just key it in like super fast. I apply them using the extended chart options in astro.com. Yeah, there's an Excel sheet for the numbers. And then, of course, there's the asteroid ephemeris at Serenu. I've never actually said that out loud. I just know that it's a website that has an asteroid ephemeris, which I'll link to here. If you sign up for their, it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $8 for a year. You can get access to over 1,000 asteroids in their ephemeris, although there's like 100 or a couple hundred on the vanilla version. And I feel like it's a really fun activity to take your birth chart and take those degrees, and then you just go through that asteroid ephemeris and see what lines up. You won't necessarily have an asteroid line up with every single one of your points or planets, but it can give you a little curious insight. I think I have asteroid David Bowie on my ascendant, which I think is really cool. There is also this intuitive and practiced component of getting the sense of the energy of each asteroid. And as you meet people, or even, if someone's listening to this and you're someone who takes clients, being able to talk to that person or learn about that person and say, oh, I bet they're this such and such type of person. I bet they're a Pythia person. I bet they're a Circe person. Because you can spot them. It's totally a thing. Learn to spot them and check them out as it applies. You can also check out asteroids that are relevant to your interests. If you're really into, I don't know, they have asteroids for everything. If you're really into Egyptian mythology, you could look up all the Egyptian gods' asteroids, and so on and so forth. So for professional programs, Solar Fire is considered to be what most people use. It's available on Windows. It has robust options for it, but I don't like the interface and I don't personally use it. It's also expensive at $360. If you're a professional and that's what you like to use, that's great. But I personally have found that free options or cheaper options with a lot of patience, it gets you a better payoff in the end. They do the same. And they're less finicky and, what's the word I'm trying to say? Frustrating? I don't know. But it's totally, it depends on you as an individual. Astro Gold, it's kind of like the Solar Fire for Mac. But it only displays a handful of asteroids, not very many at all. And it clocks in at $255, so that's also pretty expensive. So unless you're going to be doing some pretty hardcore astrology research, I don't actually recommend getting those for the exploratory phase of your work. The other free options are fine. I've gotten by with astro.com, the occasional foray into astroseek.com, and a lot of patience for 10, 11 years now. So it works. I mean, Saturn in my second house over the last 2.5 years has definitely made me more frugal. So I know how to find those loopholes. But yeah, that's how it's done. That's the secret sauce. And ultimately, it's just following those rabbit holes of getting excited and looking at all the asteroids. Obviously, you can build out your astro.com database with different celebrity birth charts to make sure that you have the right Rodden rating. For those of the uninitiated, the Rodden rating is a grade of how accurate the birth time is, with AA being the best, like birth certificate in hand, all the way down to just totally unverified. So have fun and let me know what you find. Okay. Next up, it says, here's my question. This spring, I was in the running for a great job that pays more than I make now. But unfortunately, due to COVID, the company had to hold off on new hires, but they came back this week with a formal offer. Exciting. I want the job, but they want me to start next month during the Mars retrograde and eventually move across the country. Should I go ahead and start during the retrograde? So the retrograde has already begun, but in this situation, I would say if you could sign before and move after, that might be a way to get around that. I have been in a similar situation where I signed on a job close to a retrograde, and what I would say is expect there to be surprises about the job that you didn't know when you signed on. Like, it's still fundamentally the same, but there is stuff that you don't know that you'll find out later. Now, the job is probably still wonderful, but again, just weighing your options. Like, I literally wrote a pros and cons list of, do I want this one job, or am I willing to sign on this close to Mars retrograde? And ultimately, the way it worked out was, professionally, I am much further along than I was before. I have so many more opportunities, but there was a lot of frustrations in there, but I definitely feel more equipped to handle frustrations in the future too. So yeah, signing before Mars retrograde and moving after, and then just being aware that there might be surprises, but that isn't necessarily a deal breaker for you. Yeah, if you sign before and move after, that would also, the Mars retrograde could just be a really nice time. You know, it's a very introverted time. It's a good time to look back. That could be a really nice time to put together your succession plan for your next job, and to really, you know, leave the place better than you found it. So I think you're going to be in a good situation and if you go, and I wish you all the best. I hope it goes well for you, and just stay strong. Again, once we get to late November, you're going to be super in the clear. Also, another manifestation of Mars retrograde and leaving a job could be that the employer that you're leaving is big mad about it. But that happens. You have to do what's right for you, for your professional trajectory, for your mentorship, for your finances, and for your dreams. So take all those factors into consideration, and whatever you land on is the right decision. I promise. All right, that's everything for this month's Q&A video. Thank you so much for being a patron, for listening. I hope that these help you. I hope hearing all of these help. And if you ever have any questions in between that you think might be helpful to others, you can shoot them to me any time of the month at badastrologers@gmail.com. Y'all are the best. Thank you for existing. Take care out there during the Mars retrograde square Saturn, and I love you very much. Mwah.